Pirates, the bandits of the high seas, an identity and character that personified the outlaw identity of an era. Alike to cowboys and Vikings, they're pretty cool to say the least. With them is carried the atmosphere of an age revolving around the sea, of pillaging and plundering, of treasure and glory. Hello audience, Mr. Z here, and today we'll be talking about pirates. Our story begins in the late 1400s. Columbus has relayed to the old world his discovery of bountiful lands, gold and silver, resources untapped. Spain and Portugal embarked first and settled the lands of Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. France, England, and the Netherlands, too, find ambitions of reaping the fertile fields of the New World. Competition quickly arose to both stake claims and sabotage the claims of their opponents, thus beginning a business that would become known as privateering. Privateering served as the precursor to what we'd come to recognize as piracy. Privateers were hired by the empires and imperial companies to attack, raid, and plunder the loot of rival empire ships, and in time this general lawlessness and government-sanctioned piracy would breed a particular kind of man, as well as the unique lifestyle that he would live unlike anything back home. To some, privateering was a savage business, but to others it was fulfillment, achievement, legacy, but all things must end. Improved diplomacy and finalization of which lands belonged to which empire would put many privateers out of business. Some of course settled back into normal lives in the old world, while others even joined the militaries of whatever empire they were aiding. But there were also a large number of privateers who refused to give up the only life they knew, the legacy and career they'd built. Privateering offered such a unique form of freedom, power, and danger. And while this lifestyle certainly didn't suit everybody, there were some who simply couldn't give this up. And thus the trade took on new life in the form of black flag piracy. These crews no longer abided by the will of a crown. Instead, they'd find themselves united under rules of their own making. United in the common goal of finding fortune, under leaders, under a desire to live a different life. See, every pirate crew was different in terms of its operation and governance, from top-down systems with class hierarchy to near absolute democracy of the crew. Generally, the hierarchy or roles of the ship would go from a captain, who essentially filled the function of battle commander and ship overseer, while depending on the crew he may also hold absolute power, or just additionally to previous powers serve as chief navigator and course planner. Next was the first mate, a role which generally only existed on occasion to have a second command should some tragedy befall the captain, though typically second in command would fall to the quartermaster, a role which was to the captain what Congress is to the president. Typically, quartermaster's duties include hearing and attending to the needs of the crew, and managing food, water, resources, and loot. Next was the role of the sailing master, those in charge of navigating. Oftentimes, if not for the captains, sailing masters would be recruited unwillingly, being captured from enemy ships and forced to navigate for the crew. Most ships would abide by a pirate's code or articles of agreement, which the crew would draft up while transitioning from sailors to pirates, and upon signing would typically grant whoever signed it the right to vote, to arm themselves on the ship, and a rightful share to enemy treasure. This brings us to the golden age of piracy, or rather the age of Caribbean piracy, a period beginning in 1650 as a result of a great boom in sea trade and the loss of Spanish dominance in Europe, thus weakening their grip on colonies in the Caribbean. As the European empires became more centralized, so did they do away with the use of mercenaries and privateers in favor of national armies and navies, leaving a surplus of armed, trained sailors without immediate work when opportunity for plundering was fresh for the picking. First arising out of Hispaniola's island of Tortuga, and later moving operations over to Jamaica when Spain began making efforts to expel buccaneers from Hispaniola. Now, despite the illegality of piracy and the stigma surrounding the practice, many Dutch, French, English, and Spanish colonies, which the empires felt weren't worth heavy investment, had made arrangements with pirate ships as a means to generate more commerce and introduce more exotic products into their markets, creating pirate ports out of Tortuga, Port Royal, Nassau, and later down the line, New Orleans. As the 1700s came, so did the European empires really begin duking it out over supremacy of the sea, trade, and colonial resources. Small colonies like Haiti, Jamaica, and the Bahamas would find themselves under constant contention, but imperial armed forces were needed elsewhere, and thus pirates once again found themselves under the sponsorship of the empires, though by this point having far freer reign to do as they saw fit. During the early decades of the 1700s, pirates grew to great number, establishing various supply colonies across the uninhabited, uncharted, or unprotected islands of the Caribbean. This would be a place to store their loot, trade, and hide from the law, soon earning the region the unofficial name of the Republic of Pirates in 1708. A loose confederacy of pirate crews and their islands united by its own pirate code. Its quote-unquote founding began with Captain Henry Avery, or Avery as some might say, when he arrived in Nassau with 50 tons of elephant tusk, 100 barrels of gunpowder, and a haul of loot which he offered to the governor, along with his very own ship which housed these treasures, in exchange for allowing his crew and others to operate out of Nassau safely. Soon the pirates began taking seat as an elite class, bringing wealth and protection to the island, perhaps similarly to the samurai of feudal Japan. But this arrangement would all come to an end when a joint French-Spanish fleet sieged Nassau, leading the government to flee and virtually abandoning the island, while the pirates stood behind to defend the land which they had become the de facto rulers of. This would lead to continued siegings of Nassau by France and Spain, while pirates raided and terrorized the Franco-Spanish Navy. Pirate Thomas Barrow had declared himself acting governor of the province and declared war on France and Spain, while declaring that English ships would go unharmed unless the pirates themselves were provoked. However, this would later go unheeded and lead Britain to retaliate against the pirates, spelling the end of the Pirates' Republic. The Republic was essentially lawless, but the Code of Conduct created a system in which going against the interest of the group could mean death or exile on a deserted island with little more than a weapon to defend yourself with. According to the code, the pirates ran their ships democratically, sharing plundered loot equally and electing or removing their captains by popular vote. This led to a system where every member had to hold himself to a certain level of virtue based upon pirate law. The alternative being to face an essential lynch mob, but this system proved too disorganized to survive, as the reckless few who actually attacked English ships would lead England to snuff out the Republic and seize the Bahamas as its own. It'd be with that the age of pirate brotherhood and conduct had ended. What remained of the pirates were a desperate group of men turned to pure violence and survival as their freer, riskier way of life was hunted down and eradicated, many being the last generation of this creed of pirate. But what if things had gone differently? What if the pirates and the Republic had actually survived British scrutiny and persecution and created a minarchistic state? Now, why minarchism and what even is minarchism? Simply put, it is a minimal government in which the only role of said government is to maintain and provide for the people a military and court system, while free rein is given to the people to abide by their own codes of conduct and operate independently as they see fit, protecting the internal hierarchy of the pirate crew, while holding all crews accountable to violations of their code, thus giving us a version of the Pirate Republic with enforceable laws and averting the issue of beginning a war with England. Now we introduce Woodes Rogers, a former privateer himself who had fallen upon some hard times. Rogers was looking to climb his way out by leading an empire-funded campaign against the pirates, originally those in Madagascar. Such a thing was vetoed by the British East India Company because, quote, the pirates posed little threat to their business. Rogers, in our timeline, was at the head of retaking Nassau, using his high-ranking connections to become governor of the Bahamas in the years after. However, without the justification of aggressive pirates in the Bahamas, Britain may hesitate to begin a campaign against the pirates who are virtually still privateering for the British by sapping resources away from their rivals at no expense to the crown. What we may see is an extending of protectorate status from Britain to the Pirate Republic, granting the region total autonomy, but preserving it as part of the Empire, with the bonus of the Republic earning total legitimacy as a state and the ability to trade with British merchants for better weapons or what have you. The primary caveat would be in enforcing a British foreign policy and all alliances that would entail. But seeing as this would only mean continued animosity towards Spain and France while leaving British ships untouched, it wouldn't make much difference to the pirates. Culturally, this world would develop a very different idea of what it meant to be a pirate, because Nassau is never captured and the pirate crews are never hunted to extinction. The violent, merciless pirate identity never comes to pass in the Anglo mindset, though perhaps existing in the minds of the French and Spanish. Instead, to the English-speaking world, the pirates would become almost perceived as the vigilantes of the seas, enforcing their own codes of justice as they plundered the ill-gotten goods of the unjust, which in this case would be Spain and France. As the Old West cowboy became to American manifest destiny, so would the pirate become to the English colonial age. Not an image of a malevolent bandit, but a noble outlaw, tough and hardened, but moral and true. The relationship between Britain and Spain would only grow tenser in the mid-1700s, when Spanish ships began boarding and confiscating cargo they believed to be en route to the Pirate Republic, or violated the terms of the Treaty of Utrecht, which gave Britain a 30-year window to open up limited trade in the Spanish colonies. This boarding of English ships and aggression by the Spanish would lead to the War of Jenkins' Ear, a war initiated by the severing of Captain Robert Jenkins' ear by Spanish privateer Juan de Leon Fandillo in 1731. In our timeline, this war ended in something of a stalemate, but more so of a British defeat, with an invasion of Spanish Florida by British Georgia repelled and the British Navy in the Caribbean being defeated. The war was ultimately concluded because the War of Austrian Succession had broken out and was of far greater importance to both Spain and Britain, neither feeling as though there was much to gain from the continued war in the Caribbean. Britain attempted to cripple Spanish trade ports, notably silver and gold ports in Panama and Colombia, something which may very well attract the eye of the Pirate Republic, and motivate a number of pirate crews to lend their services to the British war effort, leading to the British capture of Florida, with small concessions of land being made to the Republic. What the pirates offer to the war is a unique understanding of the Caribbean and a means to combat the Spanish, which the British Empire simply did not have. The pirate lifestyle and experience in sea battles would harden crews of the Republic into a unique mercenary-esque force, perhaps even a slight bit better than the privateers previously employed. Many pirates having been former soldiers and now carrying with them the additional experience no soldier would have. The Pirate Republic would earn a name for itself as a potential source for a hired navy. The British East India Company, keeping in mind what Woodes Rogers had said about the pirates in Madagascar, how they had been using it as an underdeveloped base of operations. Why not then, if the pirates have been useful for war before, not make of Madagascar a Pirate Republic of the East? Thus an offer would be extended from the East India Company to the pirates, riches and support developing their base in exchange for protection of British ships. It'd be an investment, perhaps not for now, but for the future. And with that, the Pirate Republic of Libertalia would be formed. A more lawless and corrupt version of its Caribbean counterpart, a land where money ruled and loyalty would only be guaranteed if money was still on the table. It'd quite literally be a mercenary colony, finding regular employment by the East India Company, most immediately in the Carnatic Wars. But back in the West, the 7 Years' War had broken out. Britain was combating France in the French-Indian War, who drew in Spain, who attacked Portugal. There's a lot of people involved in this, and a lot of reasons why, but we really just care about Britain, France, and Spain right now. In our timeline, Britain and its allies defeated France, Spain and their allies, gaining French Canada, Spanish Florida, and French Caribbean colonial holdings. This time around, we need to factor in those pirates who have already captured Florida, meaning we'd probably see the concession of something else, like perhaps Cuba, to Britain, while the whole of Hispaniola would likely fall prey to pirate invasion, leaving Spain with only Puerto Rico as its sole port in the Caribbean. The later years would see pay-for piracy utilized to put down slave uprisings in Jamaica and against the Indian kingdoms, but by now a new generation of pirate was taking the reins. Unlike the old generation who sought freedom from government and abiding by a moral code of their own, many of the newcomers were of a cruder creed. Piracy in the Caribbean was losing its lucrative nature as there weren't many Spanish ships left to plunder. Countless British merchants would pass through, sure, even the unsavory types, but they'd be off limits. Regardless, some would still seek to enforce their brand of vigilante justice upon the cruel and the dishonorable, but such things were heavily frowned upon. The Pirate Republic by 1770 had become the Libertalia of the West, a mere mercenary colony. It was the only way pirates in the Republic could make a living anymore. Some returned to civilization, attempting to reintegrate into normal colonial life. Few were truly successful in that respect. Others sailed southward, establishing new bases to operate out of in South America to escape the law and regulation of British, corrupting the experiment the Republic had begun as. But most remained, bitter but accepting that their time had passed, and that the new age of pirates were not like them. Money over freedom it was. The new generation of pirate mercenaries established with Britain a code of operation, making it a company in the business of maritime war, and a greater extension of the Royal Navy. The British West Pirate Republic would be run by Jolly Rogers, the grandson of Wood Rogers, whom I have just made up. This turn of events would be much against the wishes of the old pirates, who could sense their old ways were dying, and that it was they themselves who sold away their freedom by bending to the whims of Britain all these years. They bent to the whim of Britain because it was safe, because it kept the dream alive longer, even if it died a shadow of its former self. That wasn't what piracy was about. It was about the danger, about the risk, about doing what you wanted because you knew full well you'd never get the chance again. Pirates sail the seas for months to spend the loot they earn in a single night. Perhaps it was never meant to last, but quietly is not how it was meant to die. A few, an angry and passionate few whose fire still burned in the hearts would not see the Republic go out with a huff, and if it must go out, let it be in flames. And by this time, the colonies too were growing restless. Riots in Boston, liberty or death. For decades, the British had used the Republic for war. But one last time, in one final hurrah, they once again hear the call of war. The US of Z thanks you for watching. Support your Legion by liking the video or join our ranks by subscribing for more. Mr. Z, out.